Muy buenas a todos y bienvenidos al episodio número 40 de podcast.esp, el podcast sobre podología donde traemos entrevistas a compañeros con la intención de aprender a ver la profesión desde diferentes puntos de vista. Y si hasta la fecha hemos grabado un episodio que simboliza esta idea, es el episodio de hoy, donde traemos una reflexión más allá de la podología, sino también en cuanto a la medicina moderna en general, donde tendemos a sobredimensionar los problemas y atacar las consecuencias en lugar de simplificarlos atacando la causa. Para ello, volvemos a viajar hasta Australia para hablar con Andy Bryant, podólogo que siente verdadera pasión por entender cómo funcionan nuestros pies de manera natural y trabaja educando a sus pacientes, ayudándoles a comprender y cuidar sus pies y su cuerpo. Andy trabaja en Melbourne y es más conocido como The Natural Podiatrist. Andy nos explicará cuáles son las principales diferencias entre la podología tradicional y la podología natural a la hora de entender la salud. Un enfoque hacia la causa en lugar de hacia la consecuencia. Cómo haciendo cambios en los hábitos de nuestros pacientes podemos prevenir gran parte de los problemas de salud. Para ello necesitaremos una mente abierta y ganas de aprender nuevas formas de entender la salud. Como siempre, gracias por estar ahí y no olvidéis que queremos conocer vuestras impresiones del episodio. Podéis compartirlas a través de Instagram, Facebook o la plataforma que hayáis escogido para escuchar o visualizar el podcast. Vamos con la intro. Hi everyone and welcome once again to podcast.esp. Today I have a very special program with a very special guest. My guest today is Andy Bryant, also known as the Natural Podiatrist. Hi Andy, how are you? Thanks for being with us today.
Thanks for having me, Jose. I'm well.
So the first thing I have to ask you is, what is Natural Podiatry? But for that answer, I think it's better if we start understanding a bit your background and what was your transition from to become a natural podiatrist. So could you introduce us a little bit on yourself and your career?
For sure. So I studied podiatry here in Melbourne, Australia in the late 90s, finishing in 2000. I did my honours year, a special research year under Craig Payne, where we looked at how the big toe joint affected sagittal plane motion at the knee as well. I remember that really clearly. So that was interesting. My fellow colleague then was Matthew Cotchett, who's gone on to do a lot of work on heel pain, and he's still a close friend of mine. Anyway, so then I thought I'd become an educator then, but when I was still studying, I was allowed to work a little bit, and I really enjoyed working, looking after clients. And so then I went into private practice, and within a year I was a partner in a private practice. And this went on for another 18 years in a traditional model of podiatry practice here in Australia, which I think is similar to in Spain and Europe, where most of my work, maybe 70% or 80%, was routine care, and then 20 to 30% biomechanical work. We had our own little podiatry orthotic lab where we made our own orthotics. And then I had a quite successful business, I would say, but I was also always known for not over-prescribing, and I had a good referral base because other health practitioners would send to me because they knew I would only prescribe an orthotic if I really needed to. I think it's because I was making them myself, and it meant another 4 hours of extra work, and I didn't want to do too much extra work.
I know what that is.
You can understand that. And so it never sat easy with me. I was always nervous about orthotic prescription, but I think I was good at it as well. So I was getting good results, but I was never that comfortable with it. When I was I was a cyclist, a very keen road cyclist, and doing well at that, but I had a series of injuries, and it meant I couldn't ride anymore. And I took up yoga maybe 5-6 years ago now. That was like 14 or 15 years into my podiatry career. And I noticed my own feet starting to get stronger through the yoga poses and switching the feet on. And I remember maybe 10 years ago, there was the big Born to Run trend of people running barefoot. And I was asked a lot about it then. And I remember clearly saying at work, oh no, the muscles in the foot are too small. We don't bother training those. We can't train them, you know. I don't know where I came up with that answer. It was just an easy way not to have to explain anything else. Anyway, so then I noticed my own feet getting stronger. I got rid of the orthotics that I'd been wearing for 20 years since podiatry school, as we often end up in orthotics after podiatry school for some reason. And then I thought I can help my own clients with this approach of strengthening the foot rather than supporting it. I was back into a bit of running then. Beforehand, like years ago, I'd been an elite runner, and I kept getting some calf injuries. So I was looking at running technique. The whole minimalist shoe thing was happening again this time around. And so I was looking into running technique and different shoes and just playing around with it myself. And then I just started bringing that into my practice. And so then my business partner wasn't really interested in this approach. It was very traditional. And so I went out alone about 2 years ago now, and look back, I much prefer to practice this way. My practice is now just me on my own. I still do maybe 50% routine care, which is fine. It's a nice balance for me. I quite like it. And the other 50% is natural podiatry or biomechanic stuff. But I think every client can benefit from the natural podiatry approach, and not just the biomechanic clients. Yeah. So that's it. Yeah.
Did it bring you, when you were still with your previous partner, did it bring you any problem, any issue not being prescribing so many orthotics? Or because the business model was very dependent on orthotics prescription, as you describe and as we all know. So did it bring you any problem? Because obviously, if both of you are not thinking the same way, and there's a financial impact that can bring some.
He always made more orthotics than I did. So maybe because I was an underprescriber to start with, we were paid a percentage of what we earned. So he would just always take more money because he was making more orthotics, and I was fine with that. When in the last few years, while I was still there and hardly prescribing at all, it might have upset him, but I think maybe that's why I left, because I hated the idea of a client coming in, not knowing either of us, and just being chosen to see us because the receptionist put them in with us, and getting a different model of care under the same practice roof. I couldn't see that was going to last for very long, because a client would have to stick with that person in the practice. Yeah. So it wasn't, I think I was fortunate that I ran the practice myself, so I didn't have any pressure from above to prescribe a amount of orthotics. He never did that. I wouldn't say he over prescribed like some podiatrists do. He was just doing what he learned, like what a lot of us do. We just do what we learn. Yeah.
And what gave him results at the end of the day.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
And from the patient point of view, do you have questions? Because I imagine some patients could see you and see your partner, and didn't they ask why you have a completely different approach for the same condition? Which one is the best one?
Yeah, I think I can still explain that, because I still have clients asking me that when they ring me up to come and see me, or especially if they just come to see me because I'm the podiatrist on the corner, rather than they're coming to see me because I have a different approach. And so I don't say that the other approach is wrong. It just doesn't suit everyone. And so it's really up to an individual as to whether they want to take on one approach or the other. And it's a continuum, like there's a sliding scale. Not everyone wants to be in a barefoot shoe, but we could still be doing things for clients that need an orthotic to make their foot stronger. And I'm not just talking about some ticking the box exercise. I'm talking about some of the big things that I do that would mean they might not need to be in their orthotic for as long. But it's not either or. It's a really grey area, and I just have a focus of getting someone back to a very natural way of functioning, as opposed to trying to support and unload. It was interesting. Recently, there was a continuing education here in Melbourne with 3 local podiatrists that are high in academia and research and with sporting clubs. It was called plantar heel pain, or it was called heel pain, to load or to unload. And it was with the Sports Medicine Australia group. And so I was watching it alongside some physios and chiropractors, and they're all of the view to load a lot of injuries. And at the end of this little 3-part discussion, all the podiatrists decided, yes, unloading is still the way to go for plantar heel pain. And the physios and the chiros, they're like, this is crazy. Like, what are you going to do unloading it all the time? You know, podiatry is really stuck to support and unloading. It's like the dog with a bone. And really, I think we need to move on and start properly loading things, and then we'll see better results. And that's maybe what natural podiatry is. Our body's meant to be loaded and used, and that's my aim, to get people moving, you know.
Wonderful. I think it's a very powerful description. So I'm going to ask you a more specific description of what natural podiatry means for you, or how you understand it should be.
Yeah. So like I kind of just said then, I look through at every client through the lens of how far is this from the way it was designed to function, and what does that mean for why they have an injury, or why they have an ingrown toenail, or why they have tight ankles, or swelling in the foot, like for everything that anyone would come and see me for. And how can we move them closer to their natural function, or help their foot get back to more movement, more function, and how is that going to benefit them? And that's not always the case. Like sometimes I still have to go the other way and move them away from natural function. And but that's the lens that I'm looking through all the time with every client, as opposed to thinking about unloading things so much. And I might still unload, but I might unload by increasing strength in an area, or gait retraining, or footwear changes, or, like I use different tools. And I still use orthotics, but not nearly as much, hardly at all, and nearly always off-the-shelf orthotics.
Okay, because I imagine in this case, your capacity to use this approach depends a lot on the expectations of the patient and how collaborative, proactive the patient wants to be, because it requires a lot of work from them. So how do you do the triage to know which patients will be suitable for you and which patients will require a more traditional approach?
So personally, I am my own receptionist now. I do it all. And so I'm triaging everyone I see, especially for the biomechanic issues. If someone comes because they can't reach their feet and cut their own toenails, I'm not triaging them as to whether they fit for natural podiatry. I might just say they have to wait 3 weeks and they'll go and find another podiatrist, and that's fine by me as well. That's how I might triage them. But I've now become a podiatrist that people come to see because of my approach, and so it's easier to triage them. And there are other podiatrists like this in the world that have that that people now go and see them for those reasons, and so that makes it easier, because your clientele are people that want this approach. And so, for example, I saw a guy this afternoon, a 24-year-old that's had a whole lot of knee injuries running, and he's just really into researching things and really wants to take this on and just needs guidance. And he's pretty much doing it himself, but he just wants me to guide him, just make sure his biomechanics aren't. Again, he's a great example because he's probably got some femoral torsion, internal torsion going on, but then he's got tiv verum and pretty normal feet. But I reckon he probably had metaductus when he was a kid. There's a lot of stuff going on, but he's functioning really well. And the old podiatrist in us goes, oh, what do we do? How do we control this? How do we make this into this ideal way of moving? But I think if we just take things slowly and let his body adapt, his body will work it out for himself, and he'll be running for a very long time with very in a good way. So that was a really good example of what old podiatry would have done. They would have just thrown everything at it. Whereas I think a lot of the time people's bodies are totally capable of working it out for themselves. You just have to, in a way, get out of the way, or just put out spot fires, that things that are like, oh, there's a mobility issue there, let's work on that mobility, or there's a strength issue here, let's work on that. And again, he's a good example. He's taken on the whole ethos of not just being about when he goes for a run, like he's using a standing desk and sitting on the floor and working on his hip mobility, and he's making sure he sleeps well, and he's looking after his diet. And this is what natural podiatry is as well. If someone comes to me with a health problem, and that health problem is their foot, it would be negligent of me not to find out about the rest of their life and what else might be a factor in that problem, because you could do the best treatment, whether it be traditional based or natural podiatry based, and just keep hitting your head against the wall. If this person's only sleeping for 2 hours, or having a high inflammatory diet, or has a lot of stress in their life. And I'm not saying I'm going to become a psychologist or a dietitian, but if we're not bringing awareness to those things, then we're missing out on something. And natural podiatry is about that as well.
So we could say that it's more about finding what we might be doing wrong, or what we might be doing that is not contributing to our health, rather than compensating that.
We're looking at the cause rather than the symptoms. And I think traditional podiatry has chased symptoms a lot, and pain, and this is something I've been thinking about a lot recently. Pain is the major indicator that we're trying to manage. And really, I think it sounds silly not to manage pain, but if we look after function, then pain will look after itself. And
Yeah.
I think we shouldn't be measuring always pain. We should be looking at function and how someone wants to function and how far away from that they are.
That all this sounds wonderful, but if I'm the owner of a clinic, I say, okay, but how do I eat? How do I survive? So that
Yeah.
brings us to the business model of a natural podiatry clinic.
Yeah.
What would be the main financial sources, or how would it work if one of the main reasons for income is in many cases orthotics and we are trying to avoid them in some way? So
Yeah.
how would it work in that way?
Firstly, I don't think I'm trying to avoid them. I just think I have a different way of treating with them. But I spend an hour and a quarter on an initial consultation, and I charge accordingly for that time. And I might see people maybe on average 2 to 4 times again after that, or 1 to 4 times. So I'm not getting them back over and over again, but they're talking about what I do. And so a lot of my work is that initial consultation, and I charge accordingly to that. And this is what the other natural podiatrists are doing as well. And in Australia, and I think in Europe, it's a bit easier because there's not such a big insurance system. But I think in the States, in America, it's harder. But they just go, I think they are going non-insurance, whereas I still can use insurance. I still claim private health insurance. We can still use our Medicare system here in Australia. I don't know what it is for you in Spain, but it's just that the gap is a lot bigger to come and see me. And I explain to people, because people ring around, they say, oh, how much is your initial consultation? And mine is 2 to 2.5 times as much as the next podiatrist.
Yeah.
And then I'll explain that I'm less likely to give them orthotics, that I will educate them as to a way to look after themselves. I'll act as a resource for them. Like, they're definitely spending far less money with me in the long term than the next podiatrist.
Yeah.
And I don't spell it out that simply that when it comes to money, but people can put 2 and 2 together that's the approach. And so that's the business model. And I haven't tested it fully because I'm still on my own. I don't have a receptionist. I do all the work myself, but I know I ran a traditional practice for 18 years, and I know that this model is just as financially viable because of the amount that I charge for my time and for people to be educated to look after themselves. And there's a lot of people that want that these days. They don't want to be given something just randomly. They want to know what's going on. You know, I spend 20 to 30 minutes just finding about history. And I remember I used to have someone cast within 30 minutes. And now I find I'm just talking to them for 20 or 30 minutes. That is so powerful in itself, for someone to actually listen to someone else's problem, to get them on board, that you're willing to spend time with them, and they're then invested in doing what you're going to suggest. And so that's I think how I set up the business model. There's also another part of the business model that works quite well, and I always shied away from selling shoes because I felt like it was a conflict of interest for me to say, oh, this is the shoe you need, and here it is, I can sell it to you. So I found that difficult to do. But Nick St. Louis from the Foot Collective said, but this is the first, he said he could tell that I was very wary of this. And then he spelt it out for me. He said, this is the first time that you know that these shoes are what your clients need. How do they get them? Well, here in Melbourne, we have one shop, and it's probably a 40-minute drive from where I work. And so now I offer the shoes, a minimalist shoe as well, for sale. And I make a little bit of money from that, but not a lot. But it's a bit of icing on the cake. And I know some practices here in Australia have like full shoe shops selling minimalist shoes alongside their podiatry practice. And I think if you put someone on and spent time investing in that, you would make good money that way as well, selling minimalist shoes, especially as they're a very niche market. And so if there's podiatrists selling them, this is you couldn't go wrong, because people love that a podiatrist is recommending this. People that are already this way aligned, they want this. They want someone to justify the way they already feel. I'm not justifying it just to appease them. I'm justifying it because I know the science behind it, and I know how their foot functions. And so this is the other thing. I've got a long waiting list as well. And I know through the channels of my social media and the Foot Collective social media, which is a lot bigger than mine, there's a huge demand for this work. There's another chiropractor in the States, Gate Happens, that's Court Connolly. She goes around giving lectures pre-COVID times, but also I see clients that have connected with her for online consultations, and then they realize that I'm here in Melbourne and we share the care, like she might see them or one of her colleagues sees them, and then I take over. And I get probably 3 requests a day for online consultations from all around the world. And I'm mostly...
Good index of referrals. That's a good base of referrals.
Yeah, and in person, I'll be seeing 5 to 7 new patients a week because of I'm doing something different. If I was just a podiatrist on the corner, I wouldn't be getting those referrals. And people travel. People travel a couple of hours to come and see me because they know it's not going to happen every week. I'm not going to be mobilizing their foot 3 times for the first 3 weeks, and having to come back for an orthotic fitting and giving them shockwave therapy 6 times, like they know what I'm about. I'm going to educate them how to look after their foot, and then they're going to take it from there and use me as a resource, and I charge accordingly. So that's how the business model works.
Talking about the footwear sales at the shop, a few weeks ago on my Instagram, I started a discussion with colleagues in Spain. What was their opinion about podiatrists selling shoes at the shop? First point, in Spain, it's not legal. There's no discussion with that. It's not legal. You can open a shop on the next door. That's legal. But you can't sell at the clinic. Okay. So let's talk hypothetically. So let's say that we could do it. And they will say, but we had both opinions, okay? But the main people against it were saying that we shouldn't be selling shoes because that will create a conflict of interest, and our message will lose power. That is what you said. But my point is, my treatment can consist of strengthening, can consist of orthotics, and can consist of footwear. And footwear is going to affect what I do. So what's the point of sending them to someone else that doesn't have my knowledge and might have different interests? They might end up with something different to what I prescribe, and I will be accountable for that. So why can't I do it in my own business and make sure that what they get is what I'm prescribing? So I'll be happily accountable for that.
Yes, I agree. And well, here in Australia, I know there's podiatrists selling shoes that have got heels like this, and for people listening, like a 3-inch heel, and a pointy toe box, and they're selling that out of their podiatry practice. I think there's a conflict of interest because that's going to
a big one.
You could say that selling a minimalist shoe is a conflict of interest because it might cause a stress fracture if someone went and ran too much in it in the first 3 weeks. There's Rena Harris is a podiatrist, a natural podiatrist in London, and she coined the phrase footwear therapy. And natural podiatry relies upon footwear therapy because when we change the footwear, we change so much of the mechanics of the foot compared to what traditional footwear or conventional footwear is doing. And so part of the therapy is changing the footwear. And in my practice, I don't want to have to change people's footwear. I try to make as smaller changes to people's life to get a positive result as possible. But if I think it's a real deal breaker, I'm saying you need to be changing your footwear. And if I give them exercises and mobility work and we're not getting anywhere, and I thought we could get away with not changing their footwear initially, well then 2 consults down or the second time down we haven't seen a change. I'm like, we need to go to the footwear because this is how it's what we put our feet in for most of us. For most of our weight-bearing time, it's a huge factor on what our foot is doing. Yeah,
Definitely. I think last week I had a patient. I'm really happy with this patient. She's a lady of 70 something year old with mid-foot osteoarthritis, and I said, okay, we'll do some support from you for high impact activities like long walks, but let's change the footwear. And she bought Vivo Barefoot Shoes.
Wow.
In 4 weeks after, the pain was, just with the Vivo Barefoot Shoes, the pain was half of what it was initially. And she was saying, this feels really good.
Yeah.
So just using Vivo Barefoot Shoes in 4 weeks.
Yeah, that's a huge thing. I wonder with midfoot arthritis, that's one thing that we might still use. Like if it's really, it's such a hard thing to fix or to change because we've got so much movement that we should be having in that part of the foot, and supporting it sometimes doesn't work, and it probably sometimes needs support. But maybe what's happened is she started using some muscles in her foot that are now looking after those joints a little bit better.
Giving stability.
Yeah, there's Vivo Barefoot, so you have to put a big asterisk alongside it. But they did some research that looked at some minimalist footwear, people wearing normal shoes, and then half the group went off and wore Vivos for 6 months, and they showed a 60% increase in foot muscle size, which relates to strength, over 6 months. My problem with that is that they shouldn't need to have a 60% increase in foot muscle strength.
Yeah, exactly, to start.
Why 60% down on foot muscle strength? That's what I would ask.
So, could you describe the main difference of a traditional shoe? Why the traditional footwear can be problematic and why minimalist shoe could be more convenient in many cases?
So I like to take my clients through each phase of the gait cycle from when the foot hits the ground, as to what the shoe is doing to their foot and to their gait. And so, do you want me to go through that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Let's go.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I have a foot model in front of me and a shoe or a minimalist shoe and or a foot model and a traditional shoe, and I show that when someone lands on their barefoot, and this is another thing that really gets kind of grinds me a little bit, that we watch people walk barefoot in clinic all the time and assess their gait barefoot and then make an assumption that that's what's happening in their shoe, and it's not what's happening in their shoe.
Yeah.
Because when we land on a heeled shoe, we land earlier and we land in probably more of an externally rotated position. And so to bring the big toe joint to the ground, that's what pronation does. It brings the big toe joint to the ground. It's our shock absorber to bring the big toe joint to the ground. So when we land in that further externally rotated position and in an earlier position, there's going to be greater moments, greater energy and greater force of pronation pushing us through to the big toe joint. When we land on a barefoot or in a shoe that mimics you being barefoot, so this is without a heel and without a heel counter, our foot lands more on the middle of the foot, and then it's a more gentle pronation. It's more in the sagittal plane rather than in the transverse plane. And so it's a gentler pronation to bring the big toe joint to the ground. So that's the first thing. The heel, I think, creates more pronatory moments. And we know it. There's like in the old there was something called the Dunlop KT26er. I don't know if you had it there in Spain, but it had a flared outsole. And we were told in podiatry school that a flared outsole created higher pronatory moments. But any heel will create higher pronatory moments.
Yeah.
Or if it's a foot that is more likely to not pronate so well, so more like a rigid cavus foot or something like that, then you're going to get more instability when you're landing on a cushion on the outside of your foot than if you're landing on your natural heel. So I think to summarize, and I'm going to go through the rest of the gait in a second, but I tend to think that whatever we do naturally, a conventional shoe magnifies, and that's when we see problems. So the more obvious one is a foot that rolls in too much. So we get to the big toe joint, and when we've pronated naturally and without a shoe on or with a minimalist shoe on, our foot muscles have worked to help shock absorb. So if we've been wearing a shoe that is stiff from the heel all the way through to the first MPJ, those muscles haven't had to do much of the work because the shoe is doing some of the work. Some of those shoes might have a medial post on them as well. And so I think that medial post is there to slow pronation down, because it happens quicker because there was a heel in the first place. So we don't need the medial post or the orthotic. Maybe that's why we need an orthotic as well, because we need it to slow pronation down because we landed further externally rotated and we're going to slam down onto our big toe joint. So the foot gets a better workout and therefore is stronger if it's doing it itself, that pronatory moment and that shock absorption, using the muscles in the foot to help shock absorb, as well as the rest of the body. And then we get to the big toe joint. And if we push off straight through a big toe joint, this is the windlass mechanism. We all know that. But we also have the transverse metatarsal arch there, which has a bit of a spring-like effect. So it squashes and then springs back up again. This is all happening if we have a bare foot. And when those two things happen, we see all the muscles the intrinsic muscles in the foot become rigid and make our foot stiff, and we can lever off really well. This is especially the case if our big toe is straight. There is hardly any conventional shoe. In fact, I would say there is not one conventional shoe that allows our big toe to be straight. They all push it towards the other toes. And so we lose some of the power of using that big toe. Most conventional shoes, even though they do flex across their metatarsal phalangeal joints, will still be stiffer than what a natural foot should flex across there. And so you're not going to get the same effect of that transverse arch collapsing and the big toe joint pushing off as you would if you're barefoot or in a minimalist shoe. And therefore, those muscles aren't going to be as strong or doing their job as well. And it's not just them. They coincide with the rest of our body working well. So we're at the big toe joint. It's been pushed sideways. And already we got there with a lot of pronatory moment coming across. And if the big toe pushed sideways, we're far less likely to be able to resupinate out of that position, and we're more likely to stay in that rolled in position. And then the shoe company put in toe spring to help us push off, this is on the front of the foot that helps us be able to toe off well. And we're meant to push off against the ground with our toes, again, lighting up our whole foot, lighting up the medial part of our leg all the way into our pelvic floor by pushing off through our toes. When our toes are up in the air because of toe spring, or just pushing against the shoe that's up in the air because of toe spring, we miss out. So it's just not helpful for the way we're meant to function and the way we're designed to function. And, I'm obviously talking to a podiatry audience here, but we know that these shoes came about because of a running boom in the 60s and 70s that had unskilled runners, as in poor technique runners, getting injured. And so we put in heel lifts and cushioning and support and stability. And now we wear it for everything. We wear that shoe for everything. And we wear it, if it was only for your run, that's fine, because your run might be 10 hours a week. But when we wear it all day, every day, this is having a huge detrimental effect on our foot function. I think that's about it. That's how I explain it.
Yeah, absolutely. No, and I completely agree. And trainers are now a lifestyle shoe. And you see kids of 10, 8 years with, I'm not going to say brands, but you can see these shoes with a massive midsole. That it must have 3 fingers of midsole. And it's someone with 6, 7, 10-year-old. I'm thinking, what were they thinking about? So,
and that's a great point. And this is my big passion, that children, when they're first, like we all know, if someone comes to you with their new walker, we're suggesting they're in a wide, thin, flat and flexible shoe. And then when they're 2 or 3 years of age, we change the story and we start saying they should have a supportive heel cup, a stiff shank, something to tie them in, something firm. Like how did their foot stop developing in that 8 months, whatever it was? It's the most crazy thing that we change the story from a new walker to, I would almost rather people just put them straight into those shoes, because then I wouldn't be confused why that message changes.
That's a very good point.
I that as well. Yeah, it doesn't make any sense.
Short time ago, I was reading a blog and seeing the faces of the footwear depending on the age of the kid. And as you say, after 4 or 5 year old, we tend to put some heel, something more supportive in the ankle. What has changed? In theory, the foot is stronger then. Yeah. So why do we need now help or some support on the shoe? I was trying to figure out it doesn't make sense to me.
No, and the foot never stops developing. I have 70 and 80-year-olds transitioning into minimalist shoes and their foot getting stronger. So it can't be because the foot stopped developing. Their balance is getting better when they're 70 or 80 because they're in a shoe that they can actually feel the ground. They're more likely to be able to move in a more responsive way, less likely to fall because they can actually feel the ground. And so they're the same reasons we use it on a new walker. And that reason pretty much never changes. And we wouldn't be having this discussion. We may be even out of a job if we never changed their shoes. No, 18 months. I'd be happily out of a job. I just don't think that podiatry would be such a big deal if we didn't wear shoes that have all the attributes of our modern shoe.
Yeah, and actually in health in general, if we didn't have so bad habits, there wouldn't be such a big business in private health in the world or in public health. Yeah. It's just things that we do that mess our health. We need to fix later.
Yeah, and so I'm trying to do myself out of a job because I think we should never change what the kids are in, you know. And there's
Yeah.
obviously, like, there'll be people saying, oh, but what about this situation? What about this situation? Of course, there are individual situations, but I'm talking like 98% of people don't have the need for support on their foot if they never had it. Yeah. So anyway.
No, it's a very good point. Like that, and that's the thing of natural podiatry. Try to address the reason, the cause of the problem, and not having to be constantly fixing the issues.
Yeah.
When we talk about orthotics, and I saw some time ago a post that you reposted on your Instagram. I think it was from the Food Collective saying, always that you leave a consultation with a podiatrist that they have put orthotics, make sure that you leave with a plan how to quit them, how to stop using them.
Yeah.
So I would like to hear your input about that.
So yesterday I put someone in a moon boot and like a walker for a stress fracture. Imagine if I put her in that and just didn't tell her when she was going to come out of it or what to do about getting out of it, and that in itself is an orthotic. An orthotic is just a tool to help change function or to unload or to change how the body's function. And so we, as podiatrists, we routinely, as traditional podiatrists, I should say, we routinely put people in orthotics without an exit plan. We tell them that there's something fundamentally wrong with their foot or the way they move, and the orthotic is going to fix it, and they'll have it forever. And then we send them a message every year saying, oh, it's time to get a new orthotic. And this is a very good business model.
Yeah, definitely.
And so having it, it's like with any other part of the body. If you went to your osteopath or your chiropractor or your physio and with a sore neck, and he said, look, you've really hurt your neck and you need to wear this neck brace for 2 weeks. Or he would always say that. He would never just say, well, you've got this strange shape of your neck and we're going to put a neck brace on and you're going to wear it for the rest of your life. It's just that we're so accustomed. There's this cultural idea that our feet need support, and people just go, oh, my feet must need support, you know. Oh, it's almost like this is what we're always told. And so if we were one of those other health professionals, we might, and they came to us and someone went to them with a foot condition, they might use taping or they might use a crutch or a moon boot or something on the foot, and then they would strengthen it. But podiatrists don't. They just put an orthotic in and leave it there forever. And so with every other part of the body, if we brace it, we do not leave it there forever. We mobilize it and make it stronger and work on its function, whether that be the neck, the shoulders, the hips, the back, the knee. We never leave anything in place for a long time. And so that's the reasoning behind saying that we should have an exit plan. And again, there is that 2% that still need an orthotic for a long period of time. And fortunately, we can provide that. And that's great that we have those tools and those skills to do that. Yeah. Most people, if they actually working on their foot strength and working on their habitual changes and on their footwear, I don't think even need an orthotic in the first place most of the time. And this brings me to another point that, and this is where the business model comes in, because there's a lot of evidence building up about the role of strength in strength and exercise rehabilitation for not just the foot, but for the rest of the body. In fact, there's more evidence for the rest of the body, but there is evidence mounting that the foot strength is an answer to foot pain. And so one of the things that I see is a podiatrist still prescribing an orthotic, not changing the shoe, still prescribing an orthotic, and then giving some exercises, because we're evidence-based practitioners. We need to be seen to be giving exercises because that's where the evidence is leading us. The problem with that is that if you leave the orthotic in place, you know the exercise is not going to still be done. The orthotic is going to help take pain away. I agree. It changes the load. It takes pain away. So when you do that, but then give some little exercises, the exercises aren't the main course. So people are going to skip the entree for the main course. They want the big thing that's going to fix them, especially when the exercises come for free, pretty much. They take motivation and they don't even feel like they need to do them because their pain has changed or gone away because of the orthotic. And they paid a lot of money for the orthotic, so that's where the value is, you know, like, oh, I paid a lot. This is what's the most important thing. And then the exercises that we see given are like just ticking the box, like towel scrunching or short foot, where the short foot exercise done so bad. It's the worst exercise I've ever seen done really by practitioners. Or, you know, things that aren't load bearing. Our feet are made to take our whole load times 8 when we're running, you know, like they are a huge load bearing thing. And we really think that doing a few towel scrunches might make a difference. So I think this is where natural podiatry stands alone, because we actually say, you know what, we're not going to do the orthotic because we need people to understand that changing their shoes and doing exercises, and even more importantly, making habitual changes to their life, that's where the big changes are going to be. Because if I put the orthotic in place, they're not going to listen to me on that front. And so I don't know, I forgot what your question was, but I hope I answered it.
No, I think it makes all the sense. And actually, on the practice where I work here, we have wonderful physios, and I have noticed in many cases, especially with young people or adults that are tending to be sedentary, if we provide them orthotics in the treatment, it's more likely that when you ask them, have you been doing the exercises that the physio prescribe you? Well, if they don't have orthotics, they are normally more proactive because all their improvement is going to depend on what they do, and not on the external device.
Yeah, that's right. And the people that do take it on board, like when they don't have an orthotic, like I think that was one of the issues I personally had with an orthotic. I felt then I was responsible. Someone had paid me money and I produced something, and then I was responsible for their health. And our personal health shouldn't be anyone else's responsibility. It's their own. So when I educate someone as to why they should be doing their exercises, changing their habits or changing their shoes, they now have responsibility to do that. If they don't, it's not on me. It's my job to give them exercises that aren't too hard to do, that are progressing, that aren't too laborious in terms of time, and giving them ideas about how to do them. Like, I think that's my job. But when someone comes back after 4 weeks and they haven't done their exercises, I don't expect to see a change in their pain. And nor should they, because they haven't put anything in. When someone does and takes it on board, then they're owning their own health. This is where this is like unlocking this is the key that unlocks a huge wealth of health, not just for their feet, but for their whole body. They've taken ownership over something. Yeah. They've come to see me, learnt about it, gone away, done something about it, and own their problem. They're super equipped to deal with a whole lot of other stuff, not just their feet after that. And so that's where it's a very powerful model.
And something in favor of this idea is that every time more patients ask me why. My recommendation would be this approach, whether it's orthotics, whether it's directly to physio strengthening or rehab. Why? Why am I doing this? And many more people asking me, when will I stop using the orthotics? And that didn't happen 10 years ago, and it's happening a lot more now. People are interested on taking control of their health and their progression. And I think that will take the medicine towards something more proactive and not so much focus on clinician-led consultation. Yeah. If that makes sense.
Definitely, yeah. And I think this is where the footwear comes in, and maybe that's what we should talk about, minimalist footwear. Like we touched on before, it creates strength in the foot, or it rebuilds strength that should be there in the first place, because your foot is actually having to work. And so obviously transitioning has to be done gently, and this is through a whole range of questions that I ask about how much habitual time people spend barefoot and all this type of thing. But the exercises they're hard and tricky exercises to do for the foot itself. But I also get people doing a lot of leg exercises, hip, depending on where I see deficits and mobility issues. But we have to be practical, that people don't have a lot of time to spend doing self-help exercises on themselves all the time. This is where habitual change, like not sitting so much, moving in more variable ways, sleeping well, eating well, these habitual changes that we know make a difference to our inflammatory and injury prone areas. That's super important. But then changing footwear is a simple way to create over time foot strength that wasn't being addressed before. And so I have runners and other clients that wear their minimalist shoes like all the time, apart from when they're doing their sport. That's great. That means it's like they're doing exercises without even realizing they're doing exercises, because their foot is working, and so therefore able to tolerate more load when we're actually putting the higher loads through it. This is where that we call that footwear therapy. It's using something that's actually actually going to create a positive change without having to do your exercises, you know?
Yeah. And in these patients that might try to change completely their lifestyle to use more minimalistic shoes, we know that this change in many cases can be done quickly in this gradual adaptation. So could you go along with them doing some periodic revisions or calls? How would you manage that?
Yeah, so that's one of my regular clients are people that have found out about this way and are injured, and traditional podiatry has failed them. You know, they've tried orthotics, they've tried all these things, and then they want to transition. And so we just set up a transition. Like if they're already habitually barefoot at home, it's very quick and easy usually. And then we might use a shoe that's like a transition shoe. Like there's a brand that has some cushioning, because the cushioning is the hardest thing for people to get get used to, not having cushioning. And so it depends. Like some people don't need you to help them along the way, but other people want to be seen every 2 weeks to help them along the way. But I hope that I educate people well enough that I don't need to see them that often. And then I tell them, just send me an email. Like they don't need a whole consultation to ask one little question. And so I just act as a resource for people going forward. That could be a business model that I'm missing out on. You could set someone up on a program. But I don't think that I love it that it's so individual. Everyone is so different. And if you came and sat in with me in clinic, you'd think, oh, he's saying the same things and doing the same exercises over and over again with all these different people. But there's nuances to, like, I think a lot of people are generally weak in the same areas. So that's why the exercises are often the same. But then I tailor make their advice to their individual situation. So the same with my Instagram. You won't see advice that is like very specific on how to do something, because everyone I tell is different, because it's they're all individuals, you know?
Yeah, and it's a bit going back to what we said before. We are normally approaching general habits, and general habits are normally repetitive in people. Like we all have the same idea of what a business shoe is or what a running shoe should look like. So you, with the same concept, you will reach most people, and if they need something specific, that's where you are to help.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, that's it. Exactly. Yeah.
So, moving forward, could we mention a few shoe brands that you could recommend? Could we say like lifestyle shoes and some running trainers brands that people could have as a reference to use with their patients?
Yeah. So I think the shoes need to be wide at the tip so the big toe can be straight. They need to be ideally thin in the sole, but that's the negotiable one, I think.
Yeah.
They need to be ideally flat, but as less drop as possible. And again, if we're talking about transitioning, we need to lower them down slowly. If they're used to like 15 mils drop, to go to 0 is going to be a big issue. And then flexibility allows the foot to move and the joints to move, and then the muscles move, and then they get stronger. So shoes need to be wide, because when they're wide, we get that straight big toe, which helps so much of the foot. And so that's like the non-negotiable for me. And so when people come out with a minimalist shoe that is too narrow in the toe, like even something like a Converse Chuck Taylors or Vans, they're almost like they're a minimalist shoe pretty much, but they're too narrow in the toe. And so it's actually detrimental to, like, it's even worse than, like, that's when you need more support, because you don't even have support to stop your foot rolling in more because your big toe's there. Anyway, so that brings me to the shoes. Altra, A-L-T-R-A. They've got a shoe called Escalante. It's 0 drop, but it's got like 2 centimeters of cushioning throughout. It's got a beautiful straight big toe area, so your toes can really splay and be used. And so a lot of I would send more people into that shoe or into that brand of shoe than any other shoe, really, because it's an easy way to get people to get their toes splayed. You know, for anyone with an ingrown toenail or a corn or anything that is because their toes are squished in conventional shoes, this shoe is ideal for it. But they just look like runners, which a lot of people wear anyway, and a lot of people run in these now as well. Don't you run in them? Didn't you get some?
I run on Ultra Torin. It's a bit more cushioned. I wanted something. I'm transitioning, so I'm using the Ultra Torin. And honestly, Ultra is not paying me for this, but I have never run in anything more comfortable than that. Now I'm still alternating with some Nike Pegasus that is 10 millimeter drop, and doesn't feel that right anymore when I run on the Nike. Honestly,
Yeah.
it's been 1 month of using Ultra.
And what's the comfort level? The cushioning, or is it the splay?
Is it the that I can feel my toes moving when I run on the Ultra?
Yeah.
And actually, I feel my gait. This is completely subjective, might be completely against what the evidence says, okay? But when I run, not feeling the heel makes me feel more free, like my steps are quicker. And
Yeah.
when I feel on the Nike that I have to step with the heel, I feel like in some way I'm forced to adapt the heel to the floor. So I
Yeah.
lose some time doing that in every step.
Yeah.
It's true that if I do a long run, as I get fatigued, that's a pro, that helps me. But on
Yeah.
short runs that I can manage well, having the freedom of not feeling the heel, of
Yeah.
just feeling my foot with some cushioning on, like the Ultra do,
Yeah.
gives me a more comfort and more control of my gait.
Yeah.
Definitely
Yeah.
that makes sense.
Yeah, I think it does. Yeah. But like you said, it's a one-of-one study. But that's not unusual to hear that this is what people feel. And the biggest roadblock is the way it looks, which is just crazy that anything that looks like a proper human foot is seen as a bit weird these days.
Yeah, yeah.
All these shoes I mentioned are going to be looking a bit weird because they all look like a proper human foot, which is proper toe splay, like a baby's foot. So and there's another one called Topo, Topo, Topo Athletic, and they've got some with a bit of a drop and some that are flat, and they're nice and broad as well. So they're good transition shoes. I don't have as easy access to them here, so
Yeah.
Ultra is the one that I tend to lean towards. And then we go down to full minimalist shoes. There are some minimalist shoe brands that have a bit more cushioning in them, like Zero, I think, do have a bit more cushioning in them, and some Lems do as well, and Joe Nimble is another one. The big one that is easily accessible I know here in Australia and in Europe is Vivo Barefoot, and they're not the be-all and end-all. They're quite shallow, and they're not as wide as some. So, I have like real barefoot people say that they just can't wear Vivos because they're just not wide enough.
That's the
And
extreme.
yeah, it is
That's the
extreme, but
extreme of needing something wide.
once you're in this world, it's not that extreme. It's quite common to hear that.
Yeah.
But fortunately, in Europe, there's a huge market and there are many, many brands, like hundreds of brands. And there are good websites, someone like Anya's Reviews. She's in the States, but she has them all listed. Or there's another one called the Barefoot Shoe Review. The Eastern Europeans seem to be really into it. There's a lot of shoes coming out of Eastern Europe. Balenka are a big shoe brand that are really broad and wide. But these are full minimalist shoes that like people put them on and they feel like they're falling backwards because they're so unused to putting a shoe on and there's no heel pitch, or they feel like there's no shoe on, or they feel like it's too big straight away because there's actually space around their toes. Like it's quite a interesting thing to put someone in their first pair of barefoot shoes. Like you can see them like trying to calculate what's actually going on. I'm putting a pair of shoes on and it doesn't feel like a pair of shoes, I saw her today. It's really interesting. She's got Charcot Marie Tooth, siente, but maybe a strange variant of it. Like it's not ticking all the boxes. And so traditional podiatry has pretty much failed her, and she's really motivated to do exercises and get moving and do all these things, And so she's been in like Skechers, in a big cushioned Skechers shoe, pushing her toe sideways. Falls risks are a big issue for her. And I said, what do you wear at home? And she's like, we're in lockdown for like the longest time ever. No one else in the world has been in lockdown like we have here in Melbourne. And she's barefoot at home all the time. And she says, that's the only way I can make sure I don't have to use my walking stick around home. And like, I was like, wow, this is amazing. Like she's obviously sought me out because I promote barefootedness as a good thing. But she's just told me that she's going to be best off in a minimalist shoe. She feels most stable and getting all the feedback. Like already her neurological system is lacking so much feedback from her feet. If there is any left, we need to maximize it to help prevent her fall. And if we're pushing her big toe sideways and the muscles in her foot are being already wasted away because of the disease process, if we're then putting a stiff shoe on, then they're only going to waste even more. We need to get as much input in there as possible. So it will be a very slow transition for her. But I think it's not just for like the active people. It's pretty much you can put this on to so many different people. Like everyone has feet. Everyone that has feet can move naturally with them.
Yeah, and actually, I normally tell them, try it, and you won't come back to traditional shoe once you feel it. As I said, I've been using Vivo for 6 months now, less than 6 months, and honestly, Vivo doesn't pay me neither. I wish, but I have never used anything as comfortable as that. And I was using a traditional shoe, very cushioned, everything that ticks all the boxes of a good shoe. And at the end of the day, my feet weren't feeling optimally. I said, let's just try something different. I tried Vivo, and I could be in Vivo 24 hours standing in a day, and that feels right. And it's subjective. Some people won't like it. In my experience, it helped me, and I recommend everyone understand that not everyone that can be eligible for doesn't have any condition that contraindicates a barefoot shoe. I recommend to try it, have a feeling, and if it's not their thing, they can always come back to traditional shoe.
Yeah. So Vivo do a great range because they've got like shoes that I could wear to a wedding, like some really smart looking shoes, and they've got all the way through to like the hardest of hiking boots, like really hardy boots, you know. And then there's but then if you like really business shoes, there's one in the UK called Prime Trotter, and they're beautiful shoes. There's another one called Carrots. Carets. They're beautiful suit shoes that, you know, like I have business people wearing in their like finest Italian suits in these barefoot shoes, which is pretty cool. So there's not an excuse to not be in a barefoot shoe if you really want to be in one. You know,
So as the last point of today's interview, I would like to talk about Natural Podiatry project. This is a project led by you and some other colleagues around the world, and I think our listeners today, our audience, that we have awakened something, some light in them, some different way to think, might be interested in knowing a bit more about.
Yeah. So Nick St. Louis, he runs a group called the Foot Collective in Canada. He's a physical therapist, or was. He now just runs the Foot Collective. But he and I are talking about how podiatry has such a powerful voice. Like if podiatrists say for everyone to be, you know, in a stiff shoe, then everyone is in a stiff shoe. And so this is what we're up against as proponents of natural foot function, because podiatry, you know, the foot experts are telling us the opposite of what we're suggesting. So there are other podiatrists around, though, that are thinking like this, but we're not united in any way. And so this, first and foremost, I want it to be a community, a group, so that we can feel like a community and talk to each other and understand what other people are doing. Because I know there's a guy like 50 Ks down the road doing it, but I don't even know what he's doing. And I'd want to know what he's doing, because then I might be able to do it better, and he might want to know what I'm doing, and then we can all together grow. So first and foremost, I want it to be a community of bringing those that are already involved in this type of work. So it's Nick and I and Rena Harris in London, and then Ray McClanahan, he's the starter of Correct Toes. They're like the toe spaces that he started that up. He's been doing this work for like 25 years. And for him, it must be so exciting because finally some other people are getting on board, you know, and he's not a lone voice. And then Steve Dewey, who's another podiatrist in the States who is really into active lifestyle and more lifestyle stuff than just foot specific things. But anyway, so we're coming up with this curriculum, and initially it's still like such a growing thing, but initially it was us doing like there's 40 different topics, and that 40 different topics that are obviously relevant to podiatrists, and it's not teaching podiatrists how, or it's more it's not like relearning, it's just redefining how you look at a thing. Like one of those talks, I go through how like I did today for you, how I explain a normal foot's function barefoot versus shod. You know, that would be one lesson, and there's like 40 lessons. But what we're struggling with is we're not very good in front of the camera and doing these lessons. So we've changed it a little bit. We've got like 10 lessons done, and the next 30 lessons, we're going to do podcasts where two of us or sometimes three of us are talking about the different subjects, because we all talk really easily with each other and really enjoy talking about it and learning from each other. And this is, as you would know, podcasts are the way people love to learn these days, and it's such a convenient way to learn when people are commuting or exercising or whatever. And so the Natural Podiatry is going to be a curriculum that people pay to become a member of, and they go through there will probably be like 30 hours of podcasts, and or maybe not 30 hours. Anyway, whatever it's going to be. And then worksheets where you can relate what you've heard back to your own practice as a podiatrist. And then there's no passing exam or anything like that. But what we hope is that conversations will come out of that I'll do podcasts with other podiatrists that are on board with the Natural Podiatry group. And that will be they'll all form part of the curriculum going forward. And when we learn about doing something better, we will do a podcast on it, and that will take shape of the curriculum. Because a lot of the problem with modern ways of learning, like universities, is that nothing has changed. Like, I know new grads now are learning the same thing that I did 20 years ago. I think I would love to have a natural podiatry project, a natural podiatry subject at uni where all the students got given a pair of minimalist shoes at the start of the term and had to transition themselves, and the exam was a 2-hour barefoot hike in the forest. Wouldn't that be a powerful tool for up and coming podiatrists? Not so they became natural podiatrists just. It might be just so, like you saying, oh, wow, now I understand. Because most of us have no idea. We don't know it's even an option. So if they just had some idea, so that when someone came to them and said, oh, I'd love to go down this pathway, they understood better. And they didn't say what I said 10 years ago and say, oh, no, you can't strengthen your feet, So they're like my visions for natural podiatry. But for those listening, it's going to be probably launched like mid next year by the time we get it done. And there'll be a fee, and then it'll be a lifetime membership, and you will be expected to then put into the curriculum. Like we can't make people put in, but that's what the hope is, that everyone pitches in their ideas and what they're doing and pulling bits and pieces from all over the place, and bringing together something that we can then share and get better health treatments for people. And the other vision that I have for it is that someone's walking down the street and there's a sign saying podiatrist and there's a sign saying natural podiatrist, and they can choose. Like, I'm not trying to change everyone. I'm just saying I want the public to understand that there's another option, and that they can choose that option. And I think, Nick, like, people are worried about it because they think there won't be enough business. Like, if we bring it back to that business model, I know the demand is huge. Like, if you put up your sign saying you're a natural podiatrist, you will just have people lining up, because people are sick of podiatrists that just give them orthotics. They're truly sick of it. And other health practitioners are sick of it more than even that. Like, my biggest referrers are osteopaths and chiropractors and physios that are just sick of sending people to a podiatrist and getting orthotics. And if they've got someone that specializes in the foot but does what they do to the rest of the body, it's like, it's gold.
Yeah, the direction of the health industry is going towards empowering the patient with the tools to manage their own health. And it happens with people that, instead of having a surgery, tries to exercise, and if they have the ACL broken, maybe they strengthen everything around and try to postpone the surgery as much as possible, instead of going with it as a no-brainer for the surgery.
Yeah. And guess what? After the surgery, they'll recover so much better because they're so much stronger than they were before they did their ACL.
Yeah, exactly.
It's the same with bunion surgery. I have people doing prehab, like getting their foot strong, and they're not willing to wait the two or 3 years that their foot's going to take to straighten out and they do want to get rid of that big lump, and they go and have surgery. They recover so much better because they've actually put some time in beforehand to strengthening their foot, and then not putting it back into the shoe that caused it in the first place. That's another podcast.
Yeah, that can give for a few hours more. So
That's right.
For people that like our conversation today, my recommendation could be, if they just thought, oh, these ideas resonate with me, but I'm not sure how to do it. I think if they don't dare to make a big jump because they don't have the resources, I would recommend them do what I'm doing, experiment, try. Talk with the patient, say, we can try this, that I think is going to work with you, and experiment yourself, get the results. And I think, obviously, not every patient will be eligible, but with practice, you make masters, and you can have a gradual. Not everyone has to jump blindly to use just one kind of therapies. You can experiment and have a more sweet transition towards something more natural.
That's right. And that's what I love to hear, because I'm still like that as well. Like, I'm still prescribing an orthotic if I need to. You can't say that everyone's going to fit into this perfect mold. It's just about having an open mind when someone comes in, not having any preconceived ideas about what you're going to do for them. And just keeping your mind open to all the different things. So that's a really good thing, the way you've put that. Yeah.
Thank you. And yeah, managing the expectations of the patients. I have patients that come and say, I don't want an orthotic. Okay, let's see what, and you need to have more resources, because this will happen more and more every time. So you need to have other resources to help this patient, not just refer to someone else.
Definitely, yeah.
So last quick questions, Andy. I want to be mindful with your time. It's been over an hour. We were discussing about 50 minutes. Last quick questions. If you found Andy right before starting university, what could you tell him?
Oh, wow. Like, it's interesting. Craig Payne taught me to be open-minded and to think critically. And I don't think I did. I still think I just took it on board, everything that we're told, because it's just in our nature. Oh, this is what they're telling us, this is what we should do. I would be thinking far more critically. And at that time, just before university, I was an elite national level runner. And I would also tell myself to sleep more and train less hard.
To the minimum possible and live the best life you can.
Yeah, and because I got overuse injuries and focus on technique and as a podiatrist, I would I only have what I'm having now. I don't have regrets at all, because I only through 15 years of doing it the other way can I see the difference, and so I don't have the regrets of that at all. So I don't think I wish I had started this earlier or anything, because then I think I would miss out on. Like, podiatry's got an amazing view of the foot, obviously, and we are so well equipped to look at foot function in a way that no one else does, and that fits really nicely with natural podiatry. But I would have been asking a lot more questions as well. I would have been saying, why do we need to do this orthotic? What about habitually barefoot people? You know, like, what about this? What does it mean if we push the big toe sideways? Like,
that can provoke an awkward situation at the university when the teacher doesn't know what to answer.
Yeah, I nearly got a job at the local university in the clinic, but then someone found out and they just said, no, it was a clinical role. And I think it was going to be a step too far for some people to have me in there talking to students.
But it's true, something that you talk in the Food Collective. Universities are getting a bit stuck on traditional knowledge, and there will be a space for alternative sources of knowledge, like the Natural Podiatry project, or as we're seeing on small practitioners, small clinics that they do their own work on research, and they can provide later some training to other podiatrists. And that, I think that's happening because some universities are getting a bit backwards, a bit stuck with traditional knowledge.
Yeah, that's right. Top heavy. And I think like this, you call this an alternative therapy, but I would suggest that the human foot's been functioning this way for the last tens of thousands of years, and what we're doing now is very relatively new to the foot.
Sorry, not alternative therapy, alternative knowledge.
Alternative knowledge. That's true, yeah. And also with the natural, this is something else I joke about with the Natural Podiatry project. It doesn't matter how long it takes us to do it, because the message is not going to change. The foot is still functioning just like a foot functions, you know?
Yeah,
that's not changing.
That hasn't changed.
Yeah.
I like it. I was listening. I'm going to listen now or read James Nestor's book, Breathe, the new science of a lost art. And what he says is, this is not new. This has been done for a long time. Just we stopped doing it. So this is something that this hasn't changed. Your breathing apparatus hasn't changed. We're using words.
Yeah,
so this is a bit of the same.
We just added other elements in that have made it worse. And so natural podiatry is all about taking away those elements. Let's take away the elements that have made our foot worse. Sitting, sedentary lifestyles, modern footwear. And then we'd have far less foot problems.
Yeah, definitely. Last quick questions. Someone to come in the future to the podcast?
Oh, really? I would love you to speak to Nick St. Louis from the Foot Collective, because he just speaks so eloquently and just has the message is so clear. Or even Ray McClanahan, because he's a podiatrist. Ray from and he would love to do it as well. He's such a beautiful speaker in terms of getting the message across, and he's got a great story. Yeah, so there's two of them. Yeah,
I heard one of Ray, right? And
yeah,
he had a very good story with the toe spacers.
yeah.
And one book that you would recommend to our audience, it can be a podiatry book or can be any topic. One book that you normally recommend.
So Katie Bowman is a she's a natural mover, like proponent of natural movement. Are you there still? Yeah. And so this is a book all about changing your habits to create a better body. So look up any of Katie Bowman's work, and that will make you understand what how feet should move. Yeah.
That sounds wonderful. I'm going to check that.
Yeah.
Last question, Andy. You know what a paella is?
I do, yeah, because you're going to cook me one next time I come to London.
If you come to UK, you have a mandatory stop here. So, a paella, what's the best paella for you? And be careful with this answer.
A seafood.
Seafood paella.
Yeah, is that okay?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, it's the second best answer.
Yeah.
Normally, Australian people always said with chorizo. That's not a possibility.
No, I don't.
Never put chorizo. If you go to a tapas restaurant, if they put chorizo or they mix paellas, that's not a good place to be. And
what's the best one? You said you were going to say there's a better one than seafood.
I come from the Mediterranean coast of Spain, where we have the original. And if any one of my audience have a different opinion, I don't care. I know what's the best one. And it's made of chicken and rabbit and kidney beans.
Oh, wow. I love rabbit. I really love rabbit. I grew up eating rabbit occasionally. So I would definitely be like that one. Is it spicy? I really like it to be spicy.
No, that's not the spicy. In Spain, we don't use the spices as much as English, Australian, or American use.
Okay.
I'm not used to that now.
Not a fussy eater, so I'll have the rabbit and chicken one. That sounds wonderful.
That's the original. That's the good one, and burnt with orange tree good.
Oh, sounds really good.
So that's what I will make for you, Andy. So for everyone that wants to extend on this topic, Andy recorded 3 episodes with the Food Collective, expanding on all these 3 points, like the business model, orthotics therapy, and footwear advice. So if anyone wants to extend the knowledge, I will put the link of these episodes on the notes of the podcast, and also I will add the Natural Podiatry project link to the description so everyone can research.
And people can send me an email there from that link, and I'm in discussions with people, just telling them what's happening, and if they have questions for me, then that's a good way of contacting me through Natural Podiatry at the email address on that link. Yeah.
Wonderful, and I recommend everyone to follow Andy on Instagram. Some posts will make you think about how you approach or how you live your life and the decisions you make every day. So thank you, Andy, for being in podcast. It's been a pleasure. I really enjoy this conversation, and I think it's gonna maybe provoke some polemic. No, I think it will change the way some people think about fit and about our lifestyle. I think that's wonderful. That's what we want. So thank you very much.
Thanks for having me. And what I hope it does is those that already feel this way feel like there's hope for them in terms of their profession, because a lot of people quit if it's not feeling right. And yes, having others starting to question what they're doing. They might not change what they're doing, but just question it. Ask yourself why. Yeah.
Be more critic. Wonderful.
Yeah.
Thank you, Andy.
Thanks so much.